Akrotiri, that stunning Minoan settlement on Santorini, was once a thriving hub of trade, art and plumbing, so advanced it would make my landlord ashamed. Or at least it might do if he wasn't so busy being an absolute shit stain. Then one day the island got an extreme makeover, courtesy of the biggest volcanic eruption in human history. I am Ancient Swan, and this is what I call a wee look-see into the tale of a civilization that learned the hard way that location should probably also factor in tectonic activity. The earliest evidence for human habitation of Akrotiri can be traced back as early as 3000 BC, when it was a small fishing and farming village. By the end of the 3rd millennium, the community had developed and expanded significantly. Over the next 500 years or so, Akrotiri controlled much of the trade throughout the region, becoming a local powerhouse of the Aegean Sea. Akrotiri's strategic position on the primary sailing route between Cyprus and Minoan Crete also made it an important stopping point for the copper trade route. Their trade networks stretched across the Mediterranean to Egypt and further to Mesopotamia, and even India were all in on the action. The people of Akrotiri had it good. They weren't just lounging around in mud huts. They had multi-story buildings, indoor plumbing and frescoes that make modern interior designers cry their little girl pants. And if you think having to clean your coffee machine is a crisis, imagine living in 1600 BCE and being told to somehow build a fully functioning drainage system without any of today's technology. The ancient engineers of Akrotiri didn't mess around. And then there's the art. Imagine a place where every wall was covered in beautifully painted frescoes. These people had an aesthetic sense that would make modern influencers shit their little cotton socks. You can picture these Minoans kicking back, admiring their pristine city and thinking nothing could possibly go wrong. And then the volcano woke up. Around 1600 BCE, the Thera eruption happened, and by happened, I mean this thing basically restructured the Aegean Sea. The explosion shot ash miles into the sky, creating one of the loudest sounds ever heard by human ears, assuming anyone was close enough to hear it and still had eardrums afterward. Scientists estimate that the eruption was more than 4 times the size of Krakatoa in 1883, which, if you're not a volcano enthusiast, is basically apocalyptic levels of very, very bad. The volcanic eruption on the island of Thera, now known as Santorini, was one of the largest eruptions in the past 10,000 years, with a range of 30 to 40 cubic kilometers. Imagine sitting at home one day, minding your own business, wondering whether or not to grab some cold beers for after work, and then suddenly the ground starts shaking, the sky goes dark, and you remember you forgot to renew your volcano insurance. And then, boom! And now there's 40 cubic kilometers of rock and soil floating above your head, and all of it with very definite plans on coming back down again. I think it's safe to assume that quite a few bricks were shat on this day. An eruption of this size would have most likely also generated a tsunami up to 150 meters tall, traveling across the Aegean and Mediterranean Sea and decimating populations in its path. The settlements on the north shore of Crete, 70 miles away, are also shown to have been devastated at this time. Given that Crete would be the first major port of call for anyone fleeing Akrotiri at this time, it's likely that some refugees from Thera lost their lives in the following tsunami that hit the first place they'd escaped to. The size of this eruption had far-reaching impacts on the environment and civilization in the region, primarily the Minoans. However, its effects may also have been described by not only the Egyptians, but also as far away as China, where ancient historians wrote that the sky turned yellow, possibly a result of the volcanic winter that followed the explosion. A volcanic winter occurs when there is so much sulfuric acid in the sky that it blocks out the effects of the sun, and the entire planet then feels the devastating cold seasons, brought on by being out of the sun's rays for so long. I wonder how we'd cope with such a cataclysm if it were to happen in modern times. My guess is we'd all be quite far up shit creek without a paddle. It would probably be at that moment that about 90% of the population of Earth suddenly realizes those doom preppers were not the stupid ones after all. Never mind having a bunker, I don't even have a basement. I'd be so incredibly cooked. In fact, typing this sentence is really making me realize how much I have to do if I want to be even just 1% prepared for the apocalypse. Dear Jehovah, please do not make the apocalypse happen any time soon. I've got nothing done and I don't think I'd make it. Thank you and amen. Unlike Pompeii, where residents were caught mid-oh-no and preserved in volcanic ash, Akrotiri shows no signs of human remains. This suggests that the residents saw the writing on the molten wall and got out before disaster struck. So you've really got to hand it to the locals of Akrotiri at that time, especially in comparison to the folks at Pompeii. Whereas the Pompeians were all like, "Don't worry, bro, we'll just stay here, it'll be fine." The folks at Akrotiri were very much of the mindset of, "Fuck this, I'm off somewhere that isn't here." If only modern disaster movies could follow the same logic. I swear I get irrationally angry staring at a film where the main character decides to stick around and film stuff hit the fan, instead of just getting out as fast as their wee legs will carry them. Completely unrelated to all of this, but I've started now, so I'll finish. I watched a film recently called Moonfall, and god damn holy crap if it didn't make me want to scream. There's a scene with this bunch of main character idiots standing on the hillside watching the world collapse. There's these towering infernos of flames so close they could probably smell themselves cook, and behind this there's this mile-high tsunami making its way inland right towards them. Certain death is barely a quarter-mile away, and one of them suggests maybe they should get out of there. And I'm screaming at the screen, "Really, really? Do you think you should leave? Do you absolute morons?" I had to get up and leave the room. Such stupidity is not conducive to my mental well-being. Anyway, what I'm saying is that Hollywood people come from Pompeii, and my people are very much from Akrotiri. We'd still probably have gotten our shit kicked in by the tsunami that hit Crete, but that's not our fault, and at least we were smart enough to at least try and get away. Although there's no definitive proof of what happened to the survivors after the eruption, one thing's for sure, they didn't stick around to find out. And then, of course, there is the inevitable Atlantis debate. Since Akrotiri was a thriving advanced civilization abruptly wiped out by disaster, some theorists believe this could have inspired Plato's famous story about a lost city sinking into the sea. Picture ancient philosophers swapping ideas. Plato sat there, probably looking all bling because why not, asking his best buds for any ideas for an epic cautionary tale about a doomed civilization, before one of them reminds him about that island place that got obliterated by a volcano. So, was Akrotiri the real Atlantis? Probably not. But was it the best example of why you should double-check your home's geological stability? Yes, it absolutely was. Akrotiri remained buried under volcanic ash for centuries until excavations started in the 1960s. What archaeologists found was shockingly well preserved. The city's infrastructure, artwork, and even furniture survived. Basically, volcanic ash is nature's most dramatic version of bubble wrap. The frescoes in Akrotiri are especially important for the study of Minoan art because they are much better preserved than those from other important sites like Knossos, such as the fresco of the blue monkeys, which may show evidence of Akrotiri's trade with the Indian continent, since smart, educated, science, animal-loving folks reckon the monkeys depicted here may belong to a species that comes from all the way over there. There's the frescoes of the boxers and the gazelles, and just look at them. 3,500 years old and still look amazing. Especially those gazelles. Honestly, I'm in love with this art, and I'm now currently considering whether or not I can get away with painting it on my walls. Might do it just before I move as revenge to the landlord for terrible pipes. Or the spring fresco, which is the first fresco to have been found perfectly preserved and still standing in its original installed position. One lovely thing about Minoan art is just how much they were a fan of the booby. In fact, from the Minoan art found all over its world, we can safely assume that in these hot temperatures, the female of the species routinely just walked around with their baps hanging out gloriously for all to see, wearing absolutely zero over-the-shoulder boulder holders. As the wisest already say, that summer heat sure does bring out the breast in women. I can't show you any of that art on here, of course, but if you close your eyes, you can imagine. Beautiful, isn't it? And I'd like to just say while I'm here, by the way, I do genuinely love this woman's skirt or lower dress or whatever you call it. I think it looks cool. I can absolutely imagine it somewhere on the streets today. You know, I'm really beginning to like these Minoan folks. When not being blown away by the incredibly good manners of the local Minoan women, visitors to the Minoan world could also have stared in wonder at the Minoans' famous bull jumpers, another event often portrayed in Minoan paintings. Not only done for fun, because only a madman would consider that fun, but also done as part of a key ritual in the religions of the Minoan civilization. Today, visitors can walk through the ruins and see how stunning this city once was, right before it became the Mediterranean's most unfortunate artifact. Akrotiri was ahead of its time, but unfortunately so was its demise. The people there built a thriving city, perfected the art of drainage systems, and probably had excellent seafood, only for a volcanic eruption to come along and erase it all. So the next time you complain about bad weather, just remember, at least you're not dealing with lava raining from the sky. And sure, you might have seen some torrential rainstorms at times, but have you ever gone up against a 150-meter-high tsunami? No, thought not, and that right there is why my neighbor needs to shut the goddamn hell up about the clouds. I don't care, Irene, I just don't bloody care. Anyway, as we finish with moaning about Irene, we've also almost finished this. This thing I did. Before we get into that, though, let me quickly remind you that if you've enjoyed anything you've been exposed to in the last 10 minutes, then be sure to like and subscribe also. I'm told that it helps the algorithm, though I'll be buggered if I've seen any evidence of that. Now, as with all great lessons, it is important to recap what has been learned today. I usually just make shit up as I go along, but I guess if a teacher were to ask me what I'm taking away from this lesson, it's never to build a house in, near, or within earshot of a volcano, though I'm not sure you could say it's something I've really learned today, as I definitely feel like I already knew this one. I guess I've learned that I like Minoan art, and whether or not my landlord has the same feelings might not be my problem. I've learned that Minoan men were probably fit and sexy and were pretty talented athletes. Meanwhile, the women chose to be sexy in a different manner. No jumping to impress the other sex is needed when you have tits so big you're taller when you lie down, and you have no desire to cover those babies up when you're standing either. Imagine though, seriously, imagine running at a bull with the intention of grabbing its horns and then somersaulting fantastically over the great animal. Or imagine trying to do that, but just as you get to the bull, you catch a glimpse of Helena watching you from the crowd, smile on her face, and giant dodonkadonks pointing, staring you in the eyes, nipples like rocket ships. You'd be gored by the bull and might not make it out alive. And I think now that you've asked, what I've learned from this lesson is how timeless the inequality between men and women has always been. Because for a man to be seen as attractive and get laid, he's got to be fit, he's got to be athletic, he's got to be talented, he's got to be wearing the coolest mankini, and he's got to be fully capable of grabbing a bull by the horns and leaping over it no problem at all whatsoever. Whereas for a woman to be attractive and get your attention, she just needs to not wear a bra. Life isn't fair sometimes. I also don't wear a bra, and the only thing I get is mocked. Ah, well, it is what it is. No point in grumbling, even though I'm doing it anyway. Now then, so there's another thing I did, and that other thing is this thing here. Much of the footage you've been watching is from the 2 maps I made for the game Cities Skylines 2. One map is the island of Santorini, as it is today, all complete with its big giant hole in the middle. And then there's my favourite other map, the one based on the island before the big Barda boom. Cool, isn't it? I made this map because I'm strangely fascinated with how the world used to look and the people who used to live in it. If you feel like playing on either map and building your new city here, then you are free to follow the links in the description below. I built a city here on the before map. In an alternative universe where Mother Earth decided to stay in her place, this is the city that Akrotiri grew to become. In 2025, my island city nation has remained one of the world's most important ports for trade. Goods from Europe to the rest of the world and back again pass through the ports of Akrotiri on a daily basis, bringing everything with them, from money and riches to disease and blight. Modern Akrotiri is also the venue for the world's only and therefore largest annual Dodge the Lava Festival, where tourists flock to see locals celebrate their volcanic ancestry by riding bulls into a house on fire, although the local fashion is still mostly based around wearing togas. The locals have also since learned about the magic of pockets. which they mostly use to store the money they've stolen from oblivious tourists. And in one final indictment of modern Akrotiri society, NFTs now exist of the frescoes, because apparently history belongs on the blockchain. However, those who have invested in fresco NFTs are now roundly mocked at every given opportunity, and so have chosen to mostly spend their lives indoors where nobody can see them or laugh right in their stupid idiot faces. Anyhow, that's just my Akrotiri, and you should probably build your own. And if you're interested in the information for those maps, then wait no longer, because here they come. They're on the screen right now, actually. Usually I would read them to you, but today I honestly just can't be bothered. It happens sometimes, usually when I reckon the workload is more than can be bothered with. As the AI voice in control of Ancient Swan, it is I who decides how much noise should come from the mouth hole. And on this occasion I have decided that there won't be a lot, so you should probably pay attention to the words rolling past your eyes instead of the sounds arriving at your ear holes. Right then, lords and ladies of this YouTube thing, that was Akrotiri, and also that was Thera, before and after the entire island unanimously agreed on mass to shift at least 3 feet to the left. As always, it has been my pleasure. Thank you for coming, and be sure to come back, else I'll know you never truly loved me. And one last thing before I check out. You are now compelled to learn about the world's greatest Patreons, Dee, George H, Malichi I, Anthony T, and Stephen, without whom I'd have probably just given up already. Thanks, folks. Peace, love, and Akrotiri. Go!